Oh, this this isn't what it looks like. Today we're gonna be talking about size, but like the size of the mods on your ship, um, because those are important. Yeah, we're gonna talk about the oversizing of mods. Let's just roll the intro and let's get on to it. How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to Killmark Collectors. I'm Brandon, and today we're going to be talking about oversizing modules on ships that they don't belong on. Now, specifically what I'm talking about here is things like putting a medium prop or something else on a frigate or a destroyer, or putting a large mod on a cruiser or a battle cruiser. Now, one of the great things about Eve, or whether it's Eve Echoes or Eve Online, is that you can fit your ship to specifically match your playstyle and what you want to do. And so today we're going to be talking about 4 different ways that you can do this, some of the pros and cons for each, and help you make a decision on how you would want to actually fit some of these ships out to get the most out of your ship and hopefully get some more kill marks. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the game, talk about what you might want to do starting with your high slots. All right, so we're on the Fulmination test server here. I have got my worm, and this is probably, I'm not going to say the most iconic or the most used oversizing, but putting medium rapids on a frigate or a destroyer is incredibly popular, and the worm is a fantastic example of this. Now, obviously, you can see here that with the worm, we do have some pretty extensive power grid, and so we're able to actually put some of those larger mods on here without really impacting too much of the overall capabilities of the ship. Now, you may end up needing to put power grid rigs or things like that, depending on the ship, depending on your skills, in order to be able to fit some of these, and that's really where we start getting into the biggest drawback, and especially with large oversized high slots. When we look at oversized high slots, typically these are going to have a lot more power grid requirement, and they're typically going to be very well suited against a particular type of enemy. In this case, having the rapid missiles is going to give us a little bit extra bang for our buck against frigates and destroyers because of that really fast explosion velocity and the small explosion radius. Now, obviously, the big benefit is that we are able to get a lot more DPS because we're using these bigger mods. That does come with a trade-off, and that's why you typically will see the medium rapid missiles, because they are meant to fight frigates, or other frigates, I should say, destroyers, smaller targets there with the high explosion speed, the low explosion radius. Now, there are other cases where you might fit other high slots, but without bonuses, the large weapons typically do get pretty extensive in their power grid needs. So you probably won't see a ton of high slots oversized, but it is one that I want to call out. Now, if we go ahead and we talk about the next area, which is going to be our mid slots, this is one of my personal favorite ways to play. Now, if you guys remember when I was fighting Linwood and he was trying to kill my RB Covops with his succubus, what I actually did there is I fit a large newt, kind of similar to what I have here. Now, with the RB, you've got fantastic power grid already because you're using drones or, in this case, cannons. I've also put missiles on here. But because you're doing that, you don't need as much of the capacitor because none of those use capacitor. And so you're able to put the large newt on here. You're able to still have some decent capability. I think if we were to go ahead here, we've got 1.5 minutes of cap with everything running, which again, is not bad. So this is the other way, and especially if you're fighting other cruisers, in this case, you are able to typically drain that cap a lot faster. And if it's going to be something like an Omen or Celestis or any of those that require cap to fire their guns, again, this is a great option. You'll also see this even on like an SFI or maybe a battle cruiser or something like that, because it's a great way to deal with frigates. So the big drawback here obviously is the capacitor consumption, but if you've got a build that's around this that doesn't need as much capacitor, whether that's because you're speed tanking or you're doing something else, you might be able to get away with it. If we go down to the low slots next, this is one of my personal favorites, and it is actually going to be using an oversized prop mod. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different capabilities, I'll say, with this, and the way that you can play around with an oversized prop. I love to put an oversized prop or a medium prop, a medium afterburner, I should say, on my stealth bomber. And the reason for this is that if we look down here, and right now I've got the Republic Fleet small afterburner on here. If I undock and I hit this afterburner, you can see that the total speed, or the top speed, is around 1100, almost 1200 meters per second. Now, why is that important, or why does that matter? Well, if I'm going to be getting in, and you can see with this build, I've got two scrams. So if I've got two scrams in here, and I'm going to be relying on this ship to get tackle on something big, if I get webbed, then I will immediately lose 60% of my speed. And so, you know, if we basically look at this, again, this is a Federation Navy, I'm going to lose 60% of my speed, and let's say that there are two of these on here, we end up basically going from 1100 down to, I think if my math works out right, it ends up being around like 200 meters per second. Still not terrible, but it can get you killed pretty easily if there's a big battleship with more than one web or anything like that. Now, if we were to instead go and overprop this, that calculation changes a little bit. So let's do that real quick. So now we're back, and we have the oversized prop. As you can see here, I've got the medium afterburner. If I hit the afterburner here, suddenly my speed is now 2400 meters per second, almost 2500 meters per second. Again, if we're talking about getting webbed, even with 2 or 3 webs at this point, my speed should still be almost 1000 meters per second, probably in the 800 or 900, with a small signature radius of the frigate with a afterburner instead of the signature radius bloom that you get with a micro warp drive. It's going to be an incredibly difficult target to hit. Now, the big problem with this is that if you look at the quality bonus that's in the ship fittings, you'll see that there is a pretty big increase in the ship's mass, which ultimately impacts its maneuverability. Basically, the heavier your ship is, the less it's going to turn, and the longer it's going to take to get up speed, so on and so forth. The reason I like doing this with the Nemesis is that the inertial modifier that it gets as part of that expert frigate command bonus, typically if you're up to 554, you're going to be reducing all of that inertial modifier by 20%, and it makes getting up to speed and actually orbiting much easier than it would be normally. That brings us to the fourth and final use case for overpropping. That is going to be with an extra tank mod. Now, typically what will happen is if you're PvPing, you're going to throw an extender on. If you're PvEing, you're going to throw a booster on. And being able to use a larger mod than you need will be a huge benefit, because nobody's really expecting a cruiser to have a large shield booster, for example. Now, I could talk about this until I blue in the face, but there's actually somebody who's done this a lot and has had a lot of success with that, and that's going to be Vetamune. And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. If you guys go over, I'll link a video that he has posted, and it is a fantastic example of how he fits out his SFI with a large shield booster and a large shield extender and a medium shield extender. He flies this thing fantastically and takes down frigates and cruisers and pretty much anything else, because that large shield booster is so tough to get around. Now, if you are going to be flying this type of build, there are going to be concessions you have to make, and you have to be very, very careful with your capacitor. This is probably the most cap sensitive type of oversizing that there is. If you're looking at trying to use, for example, a large shield extender, that is going to absolutely drain your cap incredibly quickly. So you have to be very careful, and you have to be fitting with that in mind to expect to not have cap by the end of the fight. Maybe you're using cannons, maybe you're using missiles, maybe you're using drones, whatever it is. You just need to be aware and be thinking about how you're going to handle that situation as you get into it, because ultimately, if you don't have cap, you can't run anything else, and you're probably up a creek. So yeah, let's just be aware of that. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that you found this helpful. If so, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Helps you, helps me, helps pretty much everybody, because it also helps other people find the channel. But also, if you guys have any other ideas or builds that you really like with an oversized mod, be sure to leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you guys and see if we can't test some of these things out. Maybe it'll be fun to kind of test some of these oversized mods on the test server or in the real world. Either way, I really just like flying these crazy builds. So let me know what you got. So guys, have a great weekend. Have a great week whenever you're seeing this. Until next time, remember, kill marks last forever and fly safe.